on your list in this retribution?
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats, because Comey essentially was he was worse than a Democrat. I would say the Democrats are better than Comey. But no, there'll be others. Look, that's my opinion.
Is this more about justice or is it about revenge?
It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. It's about justice. It's also about the fact that you can't let this go on. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it. And Comey was one of the people. He wasn't the biggest, but he's a dirty cop.
It's about justice. That's why dozens of people have fled my Justice Department over it. But you got to give it to Trump. It is one of the only campaign promises he's actually kept. His promise to use the Justice Department for retribution, including, as you just heard him field questions about, against former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, along with a litany of other career public servants, many of whom worked in the area of national security, who were appointed by presidents of both political parties and worked for presidents of both political parties over decades and decades in the federal government. He's also targeted state elected officials, people like New York Attorney General Tish James, his own former national security advisor, John Bolton, as well as our next guest, former director of the CIA, John Brennan. All of them, despite doing nothing wrong that we know about, had their lives upended by political attacks, reputation, assassination, and constantly being thrust into the news in a negative manner by Donald Trump himself. Now Donald Trump's DOJ retribution campaign has intersected with Todd Blanche's Hire Me campaign and found a fresh wave of momentum. Todd Blanche says it isn't just permissible, but it's actually Donald Trump's presidential duty to decide which of his enemies should be prosecuted, and we're lucky about that. Watch.
Well, look, first of all, we have thousands of ongoing investigations and prosecutions going on in this country right now. And it is true that some of them involve men, women, and entities that the president in the past has had issues with and that believe should be investigated. That is his right, and indeed it is his duty to do that. People say the president wants to go after his political enemies. No, the president has said time and time again that he wants justice.
Again, that justice has come at the cost of dozens and dozens of employees of the Department of Justice quitting over these political prosecutions. I want to bring into our coverage former director of the CIA, our senior national security and intelligence analyst, John Brennan. He is under investigation as part of Donald Trump's fixation on the so-called grand conspiracy. Also joining us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer. She was fired by Donald Trump's DOJ last March after she refused to reinstate actor Mel Gibson's gun rights. Melissa is still here as well. Director Brennan, this has been something that you've been so generous to talk about here. I want to ask you, though, what the impact is of 10 years of Donald Trump smearing people like yourself and like Liz as part of a deep state. Well, we're now a country at war against a very sophisticated cyber enemy, terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. I mean, what is the impact of targeting and purging from the government so many people with national security expertise?
Well, first of all, for individuals who are leaving the Department of Justice, the FBI, the intelligence community, because they really cannot countenance the things that the Trump administration is doing, the American people are the losers there, because there's so much expertise, there's so much capability that is no longer available to be able to fight our adversaries, foreign and domestic, and to do the things that our national security professionals are expected to do. For individuals like myself and Liz and others, I mean, it is tiring, it is wearing, and is also it comes down to what we need to do in order to protect and defend ourselves in terms of legal defense, other types of things. But this is all part of the Trump campaign to carry out revenge against his adversaries. And, Todd Bland saying that this is not, his going after his political enemies. I mean, how can he actually look himself in the mirror and believe what he is saying? As you pointed out, it looks like he is auditioning to be nominated to be Attorney General. But in many respects, what is happening right now in the Trump administration, I think, justifies and legitimizes the things that I have been saying nearly for 10 years about what is happening under the leadership of Donald Trump and how much it is eroding these institutions of governance and our rule of law and our respect for the institutions that really we have relied on for so long to keep our country safe and secure.
Liz, you were in the department most recently, and there's fresh reporting in the Washington Post over the weekend about the exodus from the office, the Eastern District of Virginia, the first office to indict Jim Comey. It included Eric Siebert. He was a prosecutor in good standing in MAGA world, had relationships with Maine DOJ. He left because there was no evidence to bring a case against Jim Comey, a view that Pam Bondi at least seemed sympathetic to until Donald Trump ordered Lindsay Halligan to bring the case. What does it say, and how do you deploy the information that's been revealed to us as a public about how weak these cases are, according to the people inside the Trump Justice Department right now?
We have seen this repeated cycle, Nicole, where Donald Trump declares that someone is a criminal. He just says, James Comey is a criminal, X person that has aggrieved him is a criminal. And then the leadership of the Department of Justice goes scurrying to try to find a crime that they can prosecute. Inevitably, the career experienced prosecutors in the department fail to find any evidence of a crime. They report that back to the leadership and they get fired. They get fired or removed from their post. The same thing that's happened in the Eastern District of Virginia has happened in the Southern District of Florida, where a very senior, experienced prosecutor was removed from the investigation of Director Brennan because she presented information to her supervisors to suggest that she believed there was not a criminal case there. She is a lawyer who was trusted by this administration even. She was handling, even leading the prosecution of the individual who attempted to assassinate the president at his golf club, and now she's out because of her refusal to pursue a political vendetta. Director Brennan is absolutely right that this is a loss for the American people. It makes us less safe in this country. But I do take some measure of comfort in the fact that my fellow career professionals have decided not to be complicit in this abuse and corruption of the justice system. It would be worse if people were staying and allowing themselves to be used to further a political agenda. I had no choice in the matter. I was fired after I refused to allow my career position to be exploited to give a veneer of legitimacy to a political favor for a friend of the president. And I take comfort in seeing that others are going voluntarily. We have seen over 3,000 Justice Department lawyers depart since Donald Trump returned to office, which is a quarter of all of the lawyers in DOJ's workforce. That is crippling to the work, but it is also a strong sign that those lawyers are standing up for the Constitution, and the Constitution is still holding strong.
It's an extraordinary figure. And when you look at what they're still doing, it just forces us to rumble with the question of who's left and what is the caliber and character of the people that are still doing Todd Blanche and Donald Trump's bidding. We'll delve into that on the other side of a short break. No one's going anywhere. We're back with Director Brennan, Liz, and Melissa. So, Melissa, we talked in the first hour about this being a break glass moment. The thing about the Department of Justice is even if Democrats run the tables and regain control of the House and the Senate, Donald Trump and Todd Blanche still wield an enormous amount of power through DOJ.
No, this is huge. DOJ has been changed. I don't know if it's irreparable. I don't know if it's irrevocable, but DOJ is markedly different than it was even 2 years ago. It was changed after the first Trump administration, though not nearly as thoroughly as it has been. And I think American people have to understand what that means for them. Like, DOJ isn't just some pie-in-the-sky agency. Like, this is the bread and butter of federal law enforcement. So when you have the president using the resources of the Department of Justice as his own personal law firm to prosecute personal vendettas, that's work that isn't being done in your communities. Like, if you have federal crimes that are going on in community, those aren't being prosecuted because other things are priorities. When you have 3,000 lawyers leaving the Department of Justice, that means that you aren't doing things like dealing with civil rights violations, dealing with police brutality and things of that nature. I mean, there's a whole slate of activities that DOJ is charged with that's going by the wayside. It's also important to think about DOJ as part of our intelligence agency, so we don't think about it in that way. I mean, obviously the CIA, the FBI have a real role in all of that, but dealing with threats and prosecuting threats after they happen, that's also part of the DOJ's mission. And when you have that kind of massive departure from an agency, like truly a bloodletting of the agency, like, you just can't do that. And so this is going to take years and years to rebuild. And it was already, I think, slightly hobbled from the first Trump administration. It has been completely gutted at this point.
Director Brennan, I want to ask you if you could just speak to what remains in the system to slow down what is now nakedly. I mean, I think a hallmark between Trump 1.0 and 2.0 is that it's all out in the open. Donald Trump says these people are dirty. Todd Blanche says we're lucky to have Trump involved in this. Kash Patel says I have a bat phone into the Oval Office. He has succeeded largely in turning DOJ and the FBI into political arms of his political operation. What still exists in the system to slow that down?
Well, I think, as Liz mentioned, there's still a legion of professionals in the law enforcement environment, the Department of Justice, as well as the CIA and other places, the ones who are refusing to follow politically motivated prosecutions, those who are refusing to support any type of political activities on the part of the Trump administration that are inconsistent with the authorities, the responsibilities of the intelligence community, law enforcement community, and Department of Justice. So we have to rely on these individuals to stand up to their professional responsibilities, and also to the courts, to the judges, to those judges who in fact took an oath of allegiance to the law, not to a political party, not to a person. And, I'd like to think that there are still some members of Congress. Certainly, I'm looking for the Republicans who at one point had spoken out against Donald Trump and had spoken in support of the law, but they seem to have just totally caved. And I think, as has been said, what has happened to our institutions is really going to have longstanding damage to these institutions, to our system of justice, and to the rule of law. And it's unfortunate. We shouldn't put all the blame, though, on Donald Trump. It's the enablers. It's those individuals in these institutions, in the halls of Congress and other places, that have allowed him to do this to those institutions of government that we, again, rely on to keep us safe and secure.
All right, no one goes anywhere. To sneak in a quick break, we'll give Liz the last word on the other side. Liz, I always feel like I'd be remiss to simply cover what the Justice Department is doing to lifelong public servants like Director Brennan or Jim Comey or yourself without pointing out the way he's using the department to alleviate exposure from criminality for people like the January 6th insurrectionists. It's the two sides that threatens the rule of law.
Yeah, one area where I see this acutely is the pardon power. It's being used to do political favors to the wealthy and well-connected, while there are thousands of ordinary Americans who have done everything under the sun to earn the opportunity for a second chance through clemency, whose applications are being ignored in favor of the wealthy and well-connected. This has absolutely shattered public trust in the legitimacy of the justice system, and has created a two-tier system of justice where some people get special favors and other people do not. And the next attorney general is going to have a tremendous job on their hands of rebuilding public trust in the Justice Department. That is going to be the top priority for repairing all of this damage has been done, is getting the public to buy into the legitimacy of the justice system again. And I hope that we will soon have the opportunity to put a new attorney general in place under a new administration who will see to doing that important work.
And we should all have that conversation. I mean, because I think it's now been so badly damaged that it's not even about snapping back. It's about rebuilding something more transparent, more nimble, more sort of easy to understand. If rebuilding trust is the central mission. I am always grateful to all of you for being here and talking about all of this. Director John Brennan, Liz Oyer, Melissa Murray, thank you so much for being here today. Coming up next for us, our exclusive conversation with former director of the FBI, Jim Comey. The next hour of Deadline White House starts after a very short break.
Well, they're back. This time about a picture of seashells on a North Carolina beach a year ago. And this won't be the end of it. But nothing has changed with me. I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid. And I still believe in the independent federal judiciary, so let's go.
This won't be the end of it. Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock. It was almost exactly 1 year ago that former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, was on this program at this table talking about that picture of seashells that he came across on a walk on the beach. They spell out 8647. And he's continuing to stand by what he told us then, that at the time he didn't know there was any violent interpretation behind that commonly used restaurant term 86, and that he did not at any point intend for his post to be perceived that way, and certainly not for it to be viewed as a call for the assassination of number 47. But he deleted the post when he heard that those sorts of things were being alleged, and including by Donald Trump and members of his cabinet. Fast forward to right now, with Donald Trump's Department of Justice eager to deliver on Trump's wish to prosecute his critics. Jim Comey is facing his second indictment from the Trump Justice Department in the last year. This latest one over that picture we just had up, on charges that he was, quote, knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life of and to inflict bodily harm on the president. And second, that he knowingly and willfully transmitted in interstate commerce a threat to kill the president. The federal judge has set a date for his trial of July 15th. The case is so weak and far-fetched that, as we've reported on this program, even some of Donald Trump's staunchest legal allies have decried it as an unconstitutional attack on free press. There was this from Fox News commentator Jonathan Turley, quote, I would prefer to crawl into one of Comey's conversant shells than write a column supporting him. However, here we are. The fact is that I believe that this indictment is facially unconstitutional, absent some unknown new facts, end quote. Another Fox News fixture, Andy McCarthy, wrote this in the National Review this weekend, quote, nobody doubts that 47 refers to Trump, the 47th president of the United States. The question is what 86 means. On that score, acting AG Todd Blanche is flailing. The term, as we shall see, is ambiguous and most commonly understood to be nonviolent. Countless others continue to go uncharged for the same conduct. This all-out effort to target Trump's former FBI director is causing massive turmoil in places we can't always see, inside the Department of Justice. On that, the Washington Post writes this, quote, more than a half dozen prosecutors have been demoted or pushed out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia due to fallout from the Justice Department's push to prosecute former FBI Director Jim Comey, leaving a key prosecutorial office understaffed and weakened. Other prosecutors have voluntarily decamped or scrambled to find new jobs, fearful they could be asked to work on cases that violate their principles. That's according to 10 current and former prosecutors familiar with the office and the case. Major cases, including one involving a terrorist attack in Afghanistan, have been hobbled by the turmoil. Washington Post adds this, quote, as the Justice Department gears up for the second prosecution of Comey, the cost to the department of the president's crusade are mounting. The shockwaves rippling through the Justice Department underline the high price of the president's single-minded pursuit of his adversaries to its personnel, resources, and mission. That is where we begin the hour. Joining us for his first interview since he was indicted by the Trump Justice Department for a second time, former director of the FBI, Jim Comey. His new book, Red Verdict, is his fourth novel. It's out tomorrow. I finished it this afternoon. We're going to talk about it. You dedicate it, though, to the men and women I just reported on, that the Washington Post reports on, the men and women who've either been purged from or have left the Department of Justice.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain in the department right now. Good people sacrificing their careers to do the right thing. I'm inspired by that, but I feel awful that they have to do it. And there are so many other good ones hanging on, trying not to have to leave the department. It's a time of pain and loss for a lot of good people. That's why I talked about them in my dedication and the acknowledgments.
What is your family's pain like right now?
Look, it's bad to be indicted. It's bad when someone you love is indicted, but they've kind of gotten used to the fact that because I've been a critic of Donald Trump, I'm a target. I'm sure John Brennan's family feels that way, Jim Clapper's family, and lots of others. There's a cost to speaking up in this strange era, awful era we're in now. And I think they accept that. I think they're proud that I act the way I do. I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to continue to speak about what I believe. But of course, it's a burden for a family. That to me is a part that I regret, but they're strong people.
You had other family members though serving in the department, your daughter and your son-in-law?
Right. My daughter was a superstar prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and was fired only because she has my last name. That's stupid, that's immoral, that's illegal in my view, and painful. She'll be okay. I mean, she got a job at a law firm, and someday I hope she'll go back to the Department of Justice. My son-in-law, who was the deputy chief of national security at that Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office, quit the day they first indicted me. Also just a tragedy to have that apolitical talent leave the department. God willing, he'll be back someday, but it both tells you the quality of the people that this organization typically has and the cost with Donald Trump at the top.
Do you know Todd Blanche? Did you ever run in the same SDNY circles?
I don't. I think he might have been a paralegal when I was the U.S. attorney there. But I don't know him. Not saying that to be facetious.
No,
I think he started out as a paralegal, which is an important role, but you don't have much to do with the U.S. attorney.
I ask because I went back and looked, and Donald Trump first used Twitter to call for your prosecution in 2017 or 18, and some combination of Don McGahn, then the White House counsel, Jeff Sessions, then the U.S. attorney, Bill Barr, who came next. There was one guy in between. And then Pam Bondi, I guess, who allowed this to go forward, but only at great cost to that office, which was essentially hollowed out. The variable isn't Donald Trump's desire to see you prosecuted, it's Todd Blanche. And so I wonder if you think there's anything personal there.
I don't think so. I think it's just Donald Trump continuing to move through people until he finds those who will literally do whatever he says. Maybe he's found that with Mr. Blanche, maybe not. Maybe his standards will be too high, as apparently Pam Bondi's were, which is a bit of a shock.
Just saying something?
Yeah, and so she's apparently headed for some important private sector job we haven't heard about yet. That may be Mr. Blanche's future, or maybe not, I don't know. But Donald Trump has a bottomless desire to gain revenge against those who've criticized him. And I'm not going to stop criticizing him because I think that's required if you care about America. And so it will just keep going. If he gets rid of Blanche, he'll try to find someone else. Look, at the bottom of every barrel, there are still apples. And so he will find someone to do what he wants to do.
Do you think that's where we are with Todd Blanche, at the bottom of the barrel?
Only time will tell. I mean, Pam Bondi, I thought, was not a good fit for the role, and her standards were apparently too high. So we'll see.
What is it that you are accused of doing?
In the current indictment, making and communicating a threat to assassinate the President of the United States.
And what did you actually do? What is your defense?
I'm not going to talk about that because as I've said many times, I believe in the independent federal judiciary, and the court rules require that if you're participating in a criminal case, you don't talk about it outside of court. And so we'll have a lot to say in the courtroom, but I want to respect the rules and the court. Then
absent any specifics, I mean, he has said to my colleague, Kristen Welker, that they're not investigating anyone else who posted this message, 8647, just you. Were you aware that you were under investigation, or are you aware of what the other evidence is they have other than that message, which is on Amazon right now for sale?
Yeah, I hate to stiff arm you, but I'm going to do the same thing. It's very important that we respect and obey the rules of the federal court in North Carolina and everywhere, even if others don't. And so I'm not going to talk about that. Except to say, as I said earlier, I am not only not guilty, I am innocent, and we will pursue this fully.
The first time you were indicted, you released a video like that, and and I think you said it last time we were on this show, you talked about your faith in the independent judiciary. Do you think that is the only leg standing?
Yes, with the exception of something that John Brennan mentioned in your last segment, that there are good people holding the line. in the intelligence community, in the law enforcement community, and among federal prosecutors at great risk to themselves. But because of the risk to themselves, it's not a reliable leg. The federal judges are a reliable leg. No matter who appointed them, they believe in something, and it's very different from the way that Donald Trump approaches justice.
Someone made the point when you said that the first time that a stool can't stand on one leg. I mean, how long can we balance on one leg as a country?
We're going to have to balance for another 2 years, and I think we can do it after 250 years of doing that. The genius of the founders' design is that the federal judiciary really does stand apart. I've dealt with federal judges my whole career. There's a powerful culture that goes to bedrock there. They care about their reputation and reality to be people of integrity and people who wear a blindfold in deciding cases. And so it's a tough act to balance on one leg, but I believe the federal judges can. And we'll get another leg, I believe, in November. There'll be 2 legs on the stool after the coming wave, which I'm no expert, but I think that's coming. The American people feel this and have had enough of this.
What is it like to see people who are your detractors, people like Jonathan Turley, defend you and basically denigrate the case that's been brought against you?
Makes you a little nervous.
I was sort of like, how bad is it that Jonathan Turley is now a Comey defender? But it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what he means by crawling inside one of my shells or whatever, but I think that it's important that people speak in an honest, open way about these things. Again, I don't want to talk about my case. They're chasing John Brennan just because he has spoken out and spoken the truth. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. That should offend you, and you ought to stand your butt up and speak about it.
Why do you think people like Lisa Monaco and Merrick Garland stay quiet?
I don't know. I mean, I can't look inside someone else's life. I've not walked in their shoes at all. I think. But
or Chris Wray. I mean, you've walked exactly in his shoes. Why wouldn't it be helpful if he was out there as Chris Christie's former attorney, as a Republican president's handpicked replacement for you, defending the men and women of the Bureau?
Look, I would like to see it, but I don't know how he thinks about it. What I hope has not happened is that Donald Trump's aiming at people like me and Brennan and Clapper and others has chilled those people, made them afraid to speak. I hope we're not there because they strike me as people of character, but I can't judge them individually.
Well, without judging them, would it be helpful to our democracy if people who have held these jobs before were telling the American people how far from normal we are?
Yes, I think everybody ought to speak. Bill Barr ought to be on your show talking about the dangers he sees and that he thought that person should never be near the Oval Office again, and look what happened when we put him back. Everybody who has a voice ought to be speaking up. But again, I can't balance what they see risked by speaking up. I don't know what their family circumstances are or those sorts of things. I am going to continue to speak up because I have grandchildren, and someday they will be old enough to understand this time, and I want them to know what Pop did during this period of time. I hope everybody feels that way.
You said this won't be the last. Do you think they're going to indict you again?
Oh, I don't. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think Donald Trump wakes up at 3 in the morning thinking about me. I do not. The reverse does not happen. But I'm sure that if this case falls apart, they'll come with something else. I'm going to have to deal with this, as I've told my family. They're going to have to deal with this as long as Donald Trump is in the White House thinking about me in the middle of the night.
Have you heard of other jurisdictions looking at trying to bring cases against you?
I've read stuff in the media about it. I don't know whether it's accurate or not.
Do you think that the case that fell apart in the Eastern District of Virginia is something that they're going to try to, that was about testimony to Congress?
Yes.
Do you think they're still poring over you testified before Congress dozens and dozens of times. Is that something that you think they're still scrubbing and trying to find something?
I guess maybe, but if there's a blessing, it's that the statute of limitations for alleged false statements is 5 years. So they had to hurry on the last one. They were running out of time. I haven't testified in front of Congress since the fall of 2020. So they're probably poring over things, but there's not, first of all, there are no false statements. And I don't think that's going to be productive. But they'll continue working on it because that's what the boss wants.
I remember when you were on book tour. I think that might have been the first time I interviewed you. But your first interview, I think, was with George Stephanopoulos. And you talked about the first time you were around Trump's first team, which I think has turned over entirely with the exception of Jared Kushner. It reminded you of Cosa Nostra, of a mob family. that was such a better group of people, for lack of any other word. I mean, that first term included people like Jim Mattis and people like Jeff Sessions and people like John Kelly. I mean, what word would you use to describe this group?
There doesn't appear to be anybody left who is willing to stand for institutional imperatives, norms, things like the rule of law in the face of a desire by the president. There were those people in the first term. Trump spotted it and wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. Apparently it happened a little bit, at least, with Pam Bondi, so she's gone. What it tells me is that he has found the crew that he was looking for.
What does that mean for the country?
It's bad. You never want time to fly, but it means it's going to be a very difficult 2 years and whatever it is, 2.5 years. Thank goodness for the elections this fall. Thank goodness for the judiciary. But we're in for a rough ride, which really shouldn't shock anyone who knew what Donald Trump was, who knew about January 6th, about the 2020 election lies. All of this was in some ways predictable, and now we're going to have to live with it. I'm going to have to live with it.
When he calls you a dirty cop, what is he talking about, and how does that make you feel?
I don't. Honestly, it's crazy that I'm at a place where I'm 65 years old and I actually find it a little bit humorous to have this obsession by this 80-year-old man with me. I don't know. And I am an honest person. I am a person who was raised to stand up and speak out. I can't do any other.
He is, based on media reports, investigating a grand conspiracy. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, went to the podium of the White House briefing room, I think in the summer, and described it as this, like Kerry Matheson, like if Kerry Matheson wasn't smart, scheme to cook the intelligence, and I don't know if it has Trump winning and then I don't know, but it involves you. I mean, do you think you will be investigated as part of their grand conspiracy investigation out of Florida?
It's hard to say. That is really red string on the basement crazy wall stuff. And so it's hard to assess from a distance. I gather they found an 81-year-old guy, Joe DeGenova, to come back to government for the first time since Duran Duran was on the charts and lead an investigation. Again, they're trying to find people who will do that which principled people will not do. And so anything's possible with this crowd.
I want to read a little bit from your acknowledgments. You write about how difficult this year has been, and you write about, as we discussed, the men and women of the department. We'll turn to the book on the other side. You'll stick around?
Of course. Thanks.
Okay. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. We're back with Jim Comey. I feel like there is so much that people don't appreciate about what happened to the first case. I just want to ask you, can you talk about that first case?
Yes.
So it's brought by Lindsay Halligan, clearly at the direction of Donald Trump. Pam Bondi didn't like the case. Eric Siebert, who's a career prosecutor in that office, leaves, says there isn't enough evidence. But your lawyers were arguing that it was a vindictive prosecution. What does that mean, and did you prevail on that?
There are court decisions that say, going back 100 years, that it's a violation of the Constitution for a federal prosecutor to come after a defendant for reasons unrelated to the particular case, as a retaliation for their exercise of First Amendment rights, or some way come after them because they stood up and resisted something in a court of law. That case is in the Abrego case, that kind of claim is being brought. And so my lawyers argued that it's obvious I was only being prosecuted in Virginia because I was a critic of Donald Trump, and they laid out a call and response. Every time I criticized Trump, he called for my prosecution again and again and again. And so to prosecute me after all that would be a violation of the Constitution. And so we didn't get that vindictive prosecution dismissal because there are all kinds of other problems with the case. It got dismissed first for Lindsay Halligan's illegitimate appointment.
You had a fancy lawyer who would have argued that, and I'm assuming, without asking you to talk about the specific case that you're facing now, that the facts are unchanged. I mean, Trump tweeted out the last conversation you and I had yesterday. I mean, he continues to attack you on a near daily basis. It would seem that any prosecution of you would be vindictive.
Well, we'll certainly make all appropriate motions in the North Carolina case. And again, you're right, I have a great legal team. We have the work that we did in Virginia, and I'm sure it'll play a role.
Would that hold for everyone who he is working down on his list for political retribution? I mean, is vindictive prosecution something that would protect someone like John Brennan or any other critic?
It would depend upon the facts of the particular case. You'd have to show there was a vindictiveness aimed at John, and if there were a case against John. But yeah, the principle is the same, and it would be useful to them, I think, to establish in Virginia that I was vindictively prosecuted. We didn't get to do that. It's the same reason it's important for my daughter to continue to sue the government for firing her without cause. The president doesn't have that power. We need to establish that. She needs to establish that.
So she prevailed in court to bring her case forward the same day you were indicted. Just a weird coincidence of being named Comey?
I guess in Trump 2.0, it's hard to believe there are coincidences, but that seems to me to be coincidental.
What does it mean for her case that it can go forward?
That she can now press to the next stage, get an answer from the government, and seek to get a ruling from the judge that the president does not have the power under the Constitution to fire a career apolitical person without cause.
Does she feel like anything that happened to her is related to her role in the Epstein cases?
I don't know for sure because she and I don't talk about the Epstein cases. I think we're both confident it's because of the family she chose to be born into.
She obviously didn't have a vote.
Bad judgment on her part.
I want to ask you about whether she inspires Nora, your female protagonist. And this is the fourth novel, right?
Yeah.
Fourth one. But I want to ask you one more question about the cases against you. If you have to rewind the tape really far, what is Trump still so mad about? What is your original sin in Trump's mind? Like, what did you do? Not let Flynn go? Or what? Like, what is it?
I'm not sure. I think it was that the investigation, not of Trump, but the counterintelligence investigation of people in the Trump orbit that we began in the summer of 2016 continued on my watch. Because I remember when he fired me, it's almost 10 years ago now, when he fired me, he talked about the pressure that had taken off. And so I think my original sin was doing that which any FBI director would have done. That is, follow your career folks saying, we need to investigate this, and then support the investigation. And then by speaking out after I got fired, and honestly about what he is and the threat he is to the rule of law, I just made it an endless, endless pursuit by him for retribution.
When you look at how he acts and how there aren't any policies that he's enacted in his first term or in 15 months of a second that Putin doesn't like, do you think the questions were ever answered about his affinity for Russia?
No, I don't know. And he's done things that are bad for Putin, right? Venezuela, harming Iran, those kinds of things. But I can't explain his continuing apparent affection for a dictator.
When you see things that are blatantly authoritarian, how central is his attack on the rule of law and people like you to moving us away from a rule of law-based democracy and toward an authoritarian structure?
Oh, I think it's really, really important that we recognize the danger to the rule of law that comes from this kind of vindictive prosecution. It is what separates us from authoritarian regimes that our statue of justice, we always depict her with a blindfold, holding the scales. And so it's never about getting people, it's about understanding facts and treating people equally so we can achieve justice. We lose that, we're not who we think we are.
Why do you think the argument that we can't have a vibrant economy if we lose the rule of law doesn't include any of the titans of industry?
Why they not participating?
Why aren't they in this fight with people like you who are facing your second indictment? I mean, why aren't the people who've benefited the most from the fact that we live in a democracy, that they're based their big banks in the heart of our democracy, a lot of them in New York or some of them in Connecticut, where some of these stories play out. Why do you think that the rule of law is being defended by people like yourself and not the titans of business?
I don't know. It's probably the roles and the kind of people. I chatted with Norm Eisen outside, who reminded me his mom was a Holocaust survivor, who taught him that when bad things happen, you will be shocked by what people will do and what they won't do. And so I think it's a test of character, and a lot of people are failing it.
Do you want to name any names?
I don't.
Your legal team is sort of a who's who. Theirs is, I don't want to insult the bad news bears because they're so cute, but theirs is pretty hapless. Are you worried, though, that the Overton window keeps moving? That at first it was, you sat here and said, I can't imagine anything will come of the shell business. When I asked you if you were worried, here you are, indicted over the shell business. Your video makes clear that you trust the judiciary to hold up that stool on one leg. Are you worried that the Overton window is moving to, I'm innocent, but I'm going to get indicted because DOJ is corrupt. I'm innocent, but I might have to go on trial. I mean, are you worried that we're shifting the window too far?
Yes. Maybe the most important respect in which that concerns me is a numbness that can creep in, that even I can feel it, like, oh, the second time, whatever.
That's what you said to me when I said, how are you doing? You said, well, the second time is less shocking. I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a bad thing. First of all, it's a bad thing that it's happening at all, that the Department of Justice is being weaponized in this way, but there's a real threat, real risk that we will all become numb to this, which has happened to us in so many ways with Trump over the last 8 years.
How do we guard against that?
Talk about it, speak about it, pinch yourself constantly to say, this is not normal. This is not who we are. We're going to be okay because it is so fundamentally not who we are. I have great faith in this country. I think the Department of Justice faces a terribly difficult time, and something remarkable is going to happen in 2.5 years. People are going to flood back in, great people, and we will have the opportunity, as you said in your last segment, to build it in a healthier way. It's a very exciting time. It's like post-Watergate when Ed Levy became the Attorney General. What a time to be alive. We just got to stay alive through this 2.5 years.
You really believe that? Like you go on trial on July 15th for something that even people who aren't your fans said is insane.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about me. We are in a very difficult time. We have to get through this. I never want to wish, especially as I look at grandchildren, I never want to wish time flying.
Yeah.
I would like time to fly a little faster, but we are going to be okay because this is so obviously not who we are. The reason that cases are being criticized across the political spectrum is because of what they are. And that should tell us all a little bit about how we're going to be okay, I think.
I didn't get to the book yet, and I want to ask you about the director of the FBI who continues to make headlines for himself. We'll sneak in one more break. We'll be back on the other side.
Yep.
Okay. Stay with us. Jim Comey, the new book, Red Verdict, comes out tomorrow. I want to read what you write in your acknowledgments reflecting on the current Department of Justice. You write this, quote, "My characters, Nora and Benny, who are imperfect like all humans, but fundamentally honest and decent, represent the beating heart of the Department of Justice I know so well. In the past year, many people like them, including some in my family, have been fired without cause or forced to quit on principle. Many other good folks remain, trying to survive until the institution can be rebuilt. I'm grateful for the sacrifices and inspiration offered by all of them. Writing was a refuge for me during a difficult 2025, a year in which the idea of apolitical justice was under serious attack. Through it all, my family and friends were there with advice, support, laughter, and love. I'd be lost without them." The book starts, as I said, with the dedication, basically to the purged public servants, and ends with that acknowledgement about how hard this year has been. The stories of the FBI agents who've been pushed out, some of them while their spouses were fighting losing battles with cancer, are these people that you know that worked for you?
Yes, many of them. A lot of them I don't know because of the size of the Bureau, but they're all the same kind of people. They're the kind of people you would want in those roles because they don't care about politics. They want to try and get things right. And the idea that they've been punished, disciplined, forced out, or had to quit is just a tragedy. And they will recover, but it's so bad to have them have to experience this pain. I'm so sorry for it.
What is Kash Patel's deal? He just was reported to have made Kash Patel with the S as a $, and his name is on an FBI emblazoned bottle of bourbon. Did you have bourbon?
I did not.
No? This is it.
Nor a $sign in my name.
This is what Kash Patel gives out on behalf of America's premier law enforcement agency. What is that? What signal does that send?
I don't remember a lot from law school, but there was an expression, res ipsa loquitur, meaning the thing speaks for itself. And so the thing speaks for itself. Your viewers don't need color commentary from me on Kash Patel. The thing speaks for itself.
Michael Feinberg is a contributor to MS Now, and he wrote about the culture that was ushered in. He was there for a little bit of it, and it was a use of polygraphs. You write in this fictional novel about how unreliable they are, so unreliable that they're not admissible in court. What does it do to a culture when polygraphs become the norm?
Just further serves to corrode it and to discourage good people just trying to do their jobs. It becomes a poisonous place where people hide from each other, hide candid remarks from each other. The director of the FBI needs at all times to hear the truth about himself, about cases, and anything you do that puts a wet blanket on that creates a danger for the organization.
What do you think the calculation is for agents that are asked to work on either the 2 cases that have been brought against you, or you said this won't be the end if there are more cases that they work on or try to bring against you?
They have to decide whether they can participate in any role for the FBI consistent with the law and regulation and constitution that sits atop the organization and their personal values. And if you can't, in any role, you ought to not be there any longer.
And if you are working on the cases against you, what does that say?
Not sure I understand you fully.
I mean, they indicted you, right? They got somebody to work on a case against you. And no one has ever, even your detractors do not believe there is anything that you've done that is illegal. Do you think the Bureau is capable of making things up against people who are their enemies?
I would hope not, but it's a very large organization. Before all the purges, it was some 38,000 folks. So there's going to be a broad array of humans in there, and so it's hard to characterize them in a broad brush.
Are you scared?
Am I scared? I am not.
Why not?
Because I know the system, I know me, I know the facts, I know my lawyers, I know judges. It would be harder if it were someone in my seat who didn't have my background. Like John Brennan is a really honorable public servant, but he hasn't seen inside these worlds in the way I have. So they're probably a little bit more, by virtue of being strange, being a little more intimidating. But look, I'm very concerned for the country. I'm very concerned for what's happening to the Department of Justice and the FBI. I personally am not afraid.
What is your message to the country in terms of deciding whether or not this is who we are in November or 2 years later in the presidential?
Decide this is not who we are, and do not become numb to it. Stand up and speak. Stand up most of all and vote this fall, because just saying this isn't who we are sounds wonderful at a cocktail party. It doesn't matter unless you vote that and we change the government.
This is the 4th Nora story. How much of this is, I mean, you write in the acknowledgments that some of this was therapy for you, but Nora now has her own story and her own arc. How much are you surprised by what writing novels is like?
It's much more fun and addictive than I expected.
Like they live in your head?
They live in your head. And it's easier for me because I've based my key characters on people that I know and love. And so,
do we know any of them?
Yeah, I mean, my daughter, my oldest daughter, Maureen, is a big part of the inspiration for Nora, and then I took parts of the other 4 kids, so no one could be mad at me if they don't like something, and put it all in there. Benny is based on my beloved friend Ken McCabe, the best investigator I ever knew, who died in 2006, and so I hear his voice, his Brooklyn baritone, when I write those scenes, so it's an escape for me. And I'll tell you, the other thing I enjoy is it gives me a chance to show people this is what it's really like inside these organizations, and it ain't boring. This is exciting, but this is real.
Do you think that it resembles your fictional version of the department, the SDNY office, and the FBI right now?
No, because of the siege that the organization is under, the people exactly resemble the way I depict them, but they're under siege. They all have go bags, either literally under their desk, if they have to quit or get fired. That's a terrible place. It's a place to be. But yeah, the people are the same. The environment in which they're working now is very, very difficult.
That's amazing, because I remember in sort of a post 9/11 time, they had go bags in case they had to get on a plane or a government to go somewhere for an investigation. They have go bags now in case they get fired or have to quit.
Yes.
It's extraordinary. Jim Comey, you never shy away from the conversation, even when you are the story. So we thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that's on your mind?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
We got to it.
You want me to name names of people? I'm not doing that.
I had to ask.
Yeah.
And I guess the last thing I would say, because it is out there, you wouldn't be surprised if there were another case brought against you somewhere else in the days or weeks ahead?
I would not. I've told my family this is only going to go away when this administration leaves office, because Donald Trump is obsessed with me and with others. I'm not alone in his wake up in the middle of the night, but he is not going to let it go, because he's an empty narcissist who has suffered some wound, he believes, at my hand, and so must avenge it no matter what it takes. And so this will continue. We ought to steel ourselves for that.
Steel ourselves, we will. The name of the book is Red Verdict. It is out tomorrow. I finished it this afternoon. It's a great read. Director Comey, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you.
When we come back from Donald Trump's revenge campaign against Director Jim Comey to Pete Hegseth's revenge or threats against Senator Mark Kelly. And just like the last time, Hegseth seems to be coming up empty legally. That's our next story. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is desperate to silence Democratic Senator Mark Kelly's warnings about his military leadership after 2 courts denied his last attempt. Hegseth is now threatening new legal action for comments Kelly made over the weekend about how Donald Trump's war in Iran is draining U.S. weapons supplies.
I think it's fair to say it's shocking how deep we have gone into these magazines because this president got our country into this without a strategic goal, without a plan, without a timeline. And because of that, we've expended a lot of munitions. And that means the American people are less safe.
Hegseth publicly responded to that, to Kelly's warning, accusing Senator Kelly of, quote, blabbing about a classified Pentagon briefing he received and promising the Pentagon's legal counsel would be reviewing whether or not Kelly violated his oath, to which Senator Kelly responded with video evidence, quote, we had this conversation in a public hearing a week ago, and you said it would take, quote, years to replenish some of these stockpiles. That's not classified. It's a quote from you. This war is coming at a serious cost, and you and the president still have not explained to the American people what the goal is. I want to bring into our coverage military analyst, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. General Hertling, as I was reading Hegseth's attack, I was thinking, I feel like I watched this on TV. I mean, they are sort of underneath and upside down Alice in Wonderland's looking glass. The testimony came from Hegseth about the stockpiles, right?
Yeah, there's not only that, not only the testimony, Nicole, but also it's stated in the National Defense Strategy, a document that Secretary Hegseth signed. It talked about the depletion of armaments and goods within the military, and that was one of 4 points which the secretary said he was going to focus on. And going back to the testimony in both Congress and the Senate, Secretary Hegseth said that. And he has also been bragging about how many precision munitions have been used in this 8-week war. You know, they've talked about 15,000 targeted strikes on Iranian facilities. Well, that's 15,000 precision weapons being used on the ground. And you also have to consider that with the amount of cruise missiles, other missiles going out of Iran into not only U.S. bases, but also the Gulf states bases, you got to consider that that's an awful lot of air defense pieces of equipment. So I didn't hear anything in Mark Kelly's comments that basically divulged any kind of top secret information or even classified information. It's well known. It's been in a lot of newspapers. It's obvious when you connect the dots. And by the way, if I can add one more thing to bridge from your conversation with Jim Comey, Mark Kelly is a good guy. I know him, you know, and that's what Jim Comey was just talking about, the men and women of the FBI. He said they are all good people. They're not about partisan politics. They're talking about the security of the nation, and that's what Senator Kelly is doing because he is a good man worried about America.
Well, I was thinking about the connection of the two stories myself, and what seems to be the same is that the appetite for retribution is insatiable. And so they went to a grand jury already to try to indict all 6 of the members, former members of the military or national security agencies, and not one grand juror agreed to indict them. So they seem now to be desperately groping around for something one of them says on a Sunday show or something that, you know, I don't know, happens in an interview forum. And I wonder what that means for the military to watch former members of the military be basically hunted by the department to see if they can make something stick.
Yeah, well, you know, it was interesting. A couple of months ago when I supported Senator Kelly on one of the programs, and I can't remember which one it was. I got a text from him. We had met a couple of years ago here in Orlando. I got a text from him, and he said, hey, thanks a lot, but be careful because they're out after everyone. And that's true. I mean, they're ignoring really important things like planning and operations and threats in order to do this retribution campaign against their perceived enemies, when their perceived enemies are just talking about the strength and health of the United States. It is just so obvious. And again, going back to what Jim Comey just said, you know, you don't have to even speak for it. It speaks for itself. You can see what they're doing, and it is so friggin' obvious that it doesn't need a whole lot of commentary, but here we are.
Here we are together again. Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, thank you very much for being part of our coverage today. A quick break for us. We'll be right back. This week's episode of the Best People podcast was a real treat for me. I got to speak in an extended way to my colleague Chris Hayes, who I usually only get to talk to on big news nights, but we got to dive in and go deep on his latest project. It's a deep dive into AI. But we also got to talk about all those things we don't get to cover when we're on TV together, covering big election nights or special coverage. Take a listen to what he told me about this president's social media habits.
But I think that, like, when it was on Twitter, particularly when it was on Twitter during peak Twitter pre-Musk,
right, when we were all there,
when everyone's there, right. It was so it was like being in a subway car with a person who's having a breakdown.
Nice.
But then we all moved to a different subway car. And he's just in there.
Like in there
and
alone.
I think it's I think it helps him. I really do think it helps him because it's like, and you're totally right that if that was more present, if it were, I mean, again, if anyone in your life, I mean, forget about, first there's athletes or celebrities, but like if a coworker, if your boss,
if you were posting all night.
I mean, it would be, no one would.
I would call Rachel and be like, you call him.